EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Welcome to EdTech Mondays Uganda. The intersection of education, technology and innovation has revolutionized teaching and learning approaches to meet the growing demand for quality education in sub-Saharan Africa. However, the challenges faced in blended learning have greatly hindered this progress. With an increasingly technology-focused approach to learning, what must Africa do to tap into the advantages of blended learning? We speak to experts in this episode of EdTech Mondays. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me today. I'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves to our audience, and I think I'll start with you, Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mujuni.
Yes.
My name is Ahimbi Charles, a teacher by profession. I teach at Mbuya Parents School. I have an experience of 13 years of teaching, and out of the 13, the 10 I have taught them at Mbuya Parents.
Ah, that's good. All right, James?
Thanks for having us, Raymond. My name is James Kasaga Arunaitwe. I'm the co-founder and executive director at Teach for Uganda. Teach for Uganda, we are nurturing a generation of leaders that is committed to advancing equitable access to quality education for children in low-income communities. That means universal primary education schools. And we've been at this for 7 years. We launched in Luwero in 2016, and now we are in 8 districts in eastern and central Uganda, angling towards the west. And post-COVID-19 is when, during COVID-19 is when we actually angled towards EdTech to ensure that children also in UPE schools are not left behind when others are learning in Kampala and other places.
Great. Thank you. Great work, Odo.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me once more.
Yeah.
It's my second time here. Thank you, Raymond. My name is Gerald Odur. I work with GS Virtual Learning. I'm currently the team leader. I have previously come here and I was the technology officer by then. I've been in the technology business for the last 10 or so years. And once more, it's very good to be here. As GS Virtual Learning, we aim to be the best at EdTech provision in the whole of Africa. Some of the things we do include skilling students. We currently work with students in primary and secondary, and we're trying to skill them in what we call the 4 C's: communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. That is the gist of what we do.
All right, thank you. James, maybe if I start with you. For some people watching, they're meeting the word blended learning for the first time. Very likely they've undergone it, but they're meeting it for the first time. What would you describe blended learning to be?
Thank you, Raymond. So for us at Teach for Uganda, really blended learning involves the 3 things. One, we believe that the learning in the 21st century should involve at least the pedagogy, which is the art of teaching, which has changed over time. And then 2, it should involve the teaching as leadership. So there's this idea that now the teacher is no longer just a teacher, but is a leader, is actually a facilitator, that the children are learning as well as they're also teaching the teacher. And then it also should involve the new technologies that are happening across the globe that are actually influencing a lot of education. So for us, that is what we call blended learning at Teach for Uganda. Maybe it's called different at other places.
No worries. But Charles, maybe if we come to you, because you're the teacher here, when the pandemic happened, there was a real risk of education, the gains of education being reversed for many children. And that's when many of us started to learn about how do you teach on Zoom, how do you teach on WhatsApp, what kind of lessons do you deliver. How have you implemented blended learning in Mbuya Parents?
Thank you, Mr. Mujuni. With blended learning at Mbuya Parents, what we did when COVID came, we had to look now for the way forward. The first thing to come, we had to hear that people can conduct some meetings on Zoom. Now, as a school, we had to bring experts to teach us on how can we use Zoom to teach. At first, it was not easy because before, teachers never used it to go into technology. Our work would be to prepare our lesson plans, schemes of work, we go teach children live. But when COVID came, we could not now access children. The only way to access them was through technology, which we didn't know by then. Now we had to get experts to train us on how we use Zoom to teach children. But again, when COVID ended, because we had now learned how to use technology, we had now to brand the teaching. Branding teaching, in this case, we could now use the soft copies we are using during Zoom. Now we integrate them in now the teaching. Whereby now, at this time, I can be teaching a lesson, like for example, if I'm teaching science, and instead of drawing the heart on the chalkboard, when I reach that part of the heart, I will now bring the video of the heart. Now I put it on the projector. Children now will see how the heart operates live, which were not there before.
Do you find children more attentive during class in this kind of blended learning? Do they learn better? Are the outcomes much better? In
fact, with the blended learning, if all schools can afford, it is the way to go. Because this is the teaching which makes teaching real. And you will see that children are enjoying the lesson. They are getting more interested. Even when you don't bring the videos to the next day, or when you don't bring the next day, now we will even ask you what has happened, because they are expecting it and you are not bringing it.
Yes.
When you bring like the ear and you want to draw on the chalkboard, Joe will tell you, but teacher, why don't you have the video of the ear? Because now they feel, when they look at those things, they will see how waves are coming, how the eardrum is vibrating, how it is changing the waves into vibrations, and it becomes real learning. Only it is unfortunate that some schools have not reached there.
I want to bring Gerald into this conversation. So many people undermine just the culture of education that many of us went through. First of all, it was a taboo to have technological devices in school. And children were consistently told mobile phones are destructive to your eyes. And so many people grew up with a culture of thinking that devices do not belong in school. And yet, post-COVID-19, we now see that devices are actually the savior of the education system. What kind of culture change had to be undergone in that very short period to appreciate the role of technology in education?
I think culturally, I would say the biggest thing is, as Charles mentioned, there was a divide. There was the school, which had all this knowledge that it wanted to deliver to the students, and yet it couldn't reach the students. So it's actually one of the quickest cultural changes that I saw. Given that we needed to have this continuity of education, people needed to get onto technology as quickly as possible. So such buzzwords as data protection, data privacy, security online started coming up. We started also seeing a shift towards schemes where schools could get like devices at a better rate. So that was really the cultural change. Right now also the government has gotten on board. I think there is currently something that they're writing about digital education. There's a paper that's being written. And so it's very good that right now it's actually coming from up, that now there's going to be, a policy that guides all of this.
James, the curriculum in Uganda was a really hardcore curriculum.
Yeah.
It was the kind that you only delivered with a blackboard.
Yes.
Then we had a curriculum review committee, got a new curriculum on board.
Yeah.
But the question that I really want to ask you is, we take it for granted here, Teacher Charles telling us, people seeing the ear and how the waves function, but somebody has got to build that device. Yes. Somebody has got to build those videos for people to learn from. Yeah. So what's been that space like for teachers to then convert themselves from just chalkboards into actually designing curriculums for technological use?
Yeah. Thank you, Raymond, for that question. I just want to let our audience know that Teach for Uganda works in some of the most marginal communities that you could imagine. So we teach in Busoga region, about 4 districts there, Kayunga, Mayuge, Namutumba, Namayingo. So these are districts that are not only so far flung, but also just even the bare minimum in the classroom is a challenge, right? So later on, you're talking about EdTech, that some of the teachers, UPE school teachers, about 85% of them have never even had a smartphone, right? And so when my colleague, my friend is talking about EdTech here in Kampala, you need to understand now the divide, what he's talking about. So the divide is actually compounded on many levels. One, it's the teacher who does not understand the technology or doesn't even have access. Two, it's the fact that even how you employ technology here, it's difficult because you're having 250. We have a classroom in Kono Primary School in Namutumba that has 250 children. No teacher could afford. Our fellows would have to stand on the table to teach. So when we looked at all these things post-COVID, and the children, by the way, came in throngs of numbers after, remember that 2 years of children who were 3 years were now 5. Those who were actually 5 are now how many? 7. All of them now compounded in P1 and P2. So we had to bring the idea of EdTech. One, so the teacher has a tablet. 2 teachers actually have tablets. We have a projector for the first time in UPE schools. And then we have a speaker. So like what you would have, I think at Makere in some of the classrooms, you have speakers. So that way you're engaging the learner both visually, they're able to see what is happening. You're engaging the learner auditorily, and also you're engaging the learner in the way you're spacing them so to ensure that they can be able to follow. Now, the curriculum is still being worked on to be brought onto the entire, to be online. Actually, we have some of our alumni who are working on digitizing the curriculum now, some supporting the government, some working with Colibri. But what we are doing now is that at the point where you are talking about policemen, for example, or you're talking about the environment in the thematic curriculum, that's when now people pull out what is on Khan Academy and show the kids, what is on Colibri and show the kids. So now children are starting to understand. And then they are not just looking at children in Uganda, they also understand that there are children in Ghana and others. So there's also this idea of global education happening. And that's the culture shift, actually, to answer the question that you asked. That's the culture shift that is happening, that now I am no longer just a Ugandan, but I'm actually a global citizen.
Charles, the question that I also have for you then is learning outcomes. It's important for a teacher to see the learning outcomes. I mean, technology is brilliant to show kids things, but it's important that they understand and the outcomes are much better. Would you say that the children you taught pre-COVID-19 and the children that you're teaching now, that the learning outcomes are becoming better with the use of blended learning?
Thank you, Raymond. I was sorry. The children we taught before COVID and the children we are teaching now, in fact, they are in two worlds. They can't even understand each other. Because for these ones, if you look at the way they take things in a better, positive way than the other ones. The other ones, it was more of cramming, but these ones, it is more of understanding. I think you are getting it now. Yeah. Only that for this case, the only challenge we normally face is there are some videos which are hard to put into teachable content. That's where now the challenge comes from. But for those videos which can be converted, it makes learning more interesting and suitable for the 21st century. Only that, in fact, like if you look at what we do at our school, at Mbuya Parents, we have now what we call e-learning. At least on every timetable, you must have at least 3 times of e-learning on your timetable. So that at least each subject can teach that e-learning, where children will now use the technology to learn. And if you look at the way those lessons are taught, it makes it interesting and less even hectic to a teacher. Because a teacher in this case, you just become a facilitator. And children will be seeing what even they are learning. And it makes even the learning easier for a child. Formerly, the teacher was the source of information, was the source of knowledge. But currently, even the child, even if you just give another child, can even instruct. Meaning that even it can even facilitate home learning. In fact, we have even some children who have even learned how to use that technology. Some of them even don't even come to school. When the day they have not come, they will even just give you a call. Teacher, do you have a lesson for today on e-learning? Then you say, yes, I have. Send it on my daddy's phone, I learn from home. And the child will even do work, will do an activity, tomorrow will bring for marking. Was not there but has learned. And now you see that that technology has made it better to teach than before. And I wish if I was in education implementation part, I would even encourage all schools to implement e-learning lessons.
Yes, thank you so much. We're going to take a very short break. When we get back, we will pick up on that subject of how do we make sure that all the schools then adopt e-learning. But now let's take a short break and get back. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village. Thank you so much for staying with us on EdTech Mondays. We're talking about blended learning, and just before we took the break, there was a firm recommendation that all schools should move towards blended learning. Gerard, I want to bring you in on this question because technology isn't cheap to start with. It's not easy to develop, that's the second, but it's also not easy to deploy. And if you want all schools to catch on to the blended learning hype, you've got to make sure that these things are in place. What have you learned in the technology development space that you can share about the blended learning and its uptake?
Thank you for that, Raymond. I've been enjoying the discourse so far. And James and Charles actually gave real-life experiences of what is happening, and it's always amazing to hear this. So as JS Virtual Learning, there's a partner who we work with called Edify, and Edify also works in rural places that don't have the best technology. And one of the things we're doing with them is we have online classes every Friday. These classes are pretty much revision. So it's in primary, first of all, and we do math, science, SST, English. And it's so amazing to see the ways that these people are using technology. So you'll find that a class will join one of our online classes with one device. So they'll get like a phone and then put it in front of the school. So you can watch the entire class. You can watch the entire class in the background while there's one person. And it's an amazing time to teach them how to use a couple of these things. How do you mute? How do you put up your hand, maybe on these online platforms? All in all, it's amazing to see how the ways they're using it.
But maybe the other question that I'd ask you is the interactivity of this. It's one thing to have the device, but it's another thing to make use of the device as an interactive tool. So how do you build interactivity into this online teaching option so that kids feel like we are involved in this teaching process and it's not someone lecturing us from a mobile phone?
Yes. Thank you for that. As James intimated before, it all starts with the pedagogy. So there has to be a shift from the side of the teachers that they should be more inclusive. In our sessions, we encourage our teachers to first of all ask a question at the beginning of the session, to check in, maybe make a prayer, ask one of the students to pray. And then after that, keep asking them questions. And you'll find that they are actually more and more interactive with this.
James, the kind of infrastructure you need to deploy e-learning means that you need to have internet connectivity across the country. And we know we don't have that kind of connectivity. It also means if you have gadgets and devices, you need electricity. And there are entire communities where electricity isn't there. So how do we work with those communities so that they're not left behind? What can government do? What can partners do to make those communities get involved?
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. A great question. I mean, we also understand the statistics that literally our country, about 80% live in these rural communities, and therefore the shift to EdTech also can cause education inequities, where the most marginalized are the ones who are left out. And that's what Teach for Uganda is trying to address. So the way we've been going at it was that the most high student-to-teacher ratios in some of the marginal schools, last-mile schools, is where we deploy the technology. But you're right, also we have had those challenges. One, the funder can only fund so much. So for example, for Teach for Uganda, we are now in almost 150 schools this year, but we've only employed technology in 25 schools. 8 of them in Mayuge that have a lab, Why? Because it's very expensive. Number two, it has its own challenges. One, you enter school where there's no electricity. So which means that you have now to let the funder know that we are not only going to deploy gadgets and all these things I talked about and teachers who are understanding the technology, but you should put solar. So you'll be seeing on our website, like we have schools for the first time, an NGO is providing solar panels, solar technology, storage systems where you store the batteries and everything, and then train the communities to be able to know how to handle this, the teachers to handle this, and then so that the technology can keep running. So that's where the challenge. So for me, the recommendation to the UNICEFs of the world, the government, and anyone who is interested in EdTech, I can see there's some interest from Airtel and others, is to really think about the last mile, because children in Uganda don't only live in Kampala, they also majority live in those communities, and places where there's no electricity, as the rural electrification hasn't gone that far. We need to think about the alternative, which is solar energy. So most of our schools where there is none, we use solar technology, and then you have to keep updating and ensuring that it's working. In fact, we just partnered with a partner that is literally helping us. It's very expensive. Like to monitor one device is about $6 per month to monitor whether it's working, whether children are using it and all that. And then on top of that, we don't have internet, so this is offline, so all the apps are downloaded and they are working offline. Now, if you want to inject internet into that, our only teachers have the internet, the students don't have internet. If you have to bring internet to that, it becomes even more expensive. So we need to also figure out how government works with partners to also reduce the cost of technology and internet, actually, so that it can be able, the ISPs, the internet service providers, can reach the last mile.
Charles, we talk about rural communities like they're the only ones facing challenges with deploying blended learning. I'm sure you have challenges too at Mbuya here. What are some of those challenges that you faced in deploying blended learning in a city like Kampala?
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. Like at Mbuya, of course, like any other school, we have also some challenges, though they are not many. But one of the challenges we have that in some cases where power will go off, and you have now to go for the generator. Thank God, as our director procured a generator which can run the whole school. But before getting that generator, even if you have just started the lesson and power go off, then you have to go back to your physical teaching. And
go back to the
you will
old
teach mood children because you will have put them in that mode of e-learning. The lesson has just moved like 10 minutes and now power has gone off. Becomes a bit hard. And another challenge may be some parents who may not be having smartphones, and maybe the child has not come. It means now that child, to catch up, you have to deny that child maybe break time. When others are going for break time, then you have to give the child a computer to go through the lesson. Then another thing is on planning, because planning also requires internet. You have to download videos, you have to convert them, all that needs internet. And those are some of the challenges we normally face.
I know that we have to bring this conversation to an end, and I know that there are many government people, policy people, private sector people who are watching this, who are saying these are challenges maybe we can solve, maybe we can put our hand to. So maybe I'll start with you, Charles. If you were to speak directly to them, what would you say this is the most pressing challenge and this is how you can solve it?
Thank you very much. That is a very interesting question, because one, they need, like the way they subsidize other institutions like army. There are some things they buy at a subsidized price. Like also let them to make teachers at least to have smartphones at a subsidized price, or if possible, they can also have data at a subsidized price, or they can install Wi-Fi in different schools. Then maybe they can make the schools to keep on subscribing. And you will find that most schools also getting on board. Then another thing which I think the government can also do, they can make the what private schools do. They can get all those services, also introduce them in government schools. Because we are in the same country, and we are the ones who teach human rights, we are the ones who teach equality. But if you see the child in a government school, the services this child is getting, and the child who is in those well-established private schools, those people are in different countries. Yeah. I think we also need to see how we can strike the balance. We make at least the children, even if they don't get all, but let them also know that they are also enjoying the digitalized education, the technology in education, like the other group is enjoying. Thank you very much.
All right. James, what would you recommend?
Thank you. I love that Charles mentioned A Tale of Two Countries. I think I've already said that if I were to write a book on education in Uganda, I would say A Tale of Two Countries, because you have 80% of the children in these rural communities who are looking at their fellow counterparts in Kampala and they're saying we live in two different nations. So for us, it's a tall order, because for last mile communities, there is no power. The Rural Electrification Agency is starting to get to these places, some of them by the lake and others. And not. So we'd start with how do you get electricity or solar to these communities, right? That's one. Two, then you would have to now be able to figure out how to work with internet service providers, what he mentioned, like MTN and Airtel, really to be subsidized. In other countries like South Korea and Japan, how they got it was government actually invested in internet service providers so that they make it cheaper to extend those services to the rural communities. So that children, you are looking at them, this is the next generation of our leaders, right? Like he said, if you want leaders who understand globalization, China and all this, they need to be online. So by then subsidizing the internet service providers and then thirdly working with partners like us, the World Bank and others, then figuring out how to then start training teachers, providing them with the subsidized cell phones. We just trained 200 at Teach for Uganda, and I can guarantee you in the 200 teachers we trained, literally about 120 were using cabinet phone. 120, so which means that I don't even know what that percentage is. So we still have a struggle to ensure that now those teachers move. And the government has a plan that by 2030, all teachers should be digitally competent, right? In the new national teacher policy, they should be digitally competent. So government will need to do more work, the Ministry of Education will need to do more work with partners, not alone, Teach for Uganda and others, to ensure that the teacher has the technology in the school, and then now us can support in how do we train teachers to ensure that they deliver blended learning. We have a saying at Teach for Uganda that no technology can ever replace a teacher. A teacher has to be involved in the planning, in the delivery, so that you can monitor the outcomes, that actually what you're delivering is actually making a difference.
Gerard, what would you recommend?
I'd like to first of all start with saying that there's quite a bit that has already been done. If you see the last 5 years and you compare them to before, there's quite a lot that has been done. The prices of internet have gone down substantially. Telecoms now have connectivity in most of these areas. Then there's a lot more electricity accessibility also in these places. So what I would say, let's do more of that. Let's see how far we can go. And I just want to stress these partnerships between government and the private sector. They are the ones that I think can really bring these changes. Some of these private sector players are importing devices. If indeed the taxes can be reduced for them, these can be given out at a cheaper price to everyone. So I look at such, if there is that strong linkage between the private sector and the government sector, there'll definitely be something good.
All right, thank you so much, Gerald. Thank you, James. Thank you, Charles. And thank you so much to our viewers who've been watching us. We've been discussing the role that blended learning is playing in communities in Africa, particularly on the education front, and the learning outcomes that it's producing. So thank you so much for joining us. EdTech Mondays will return next month with another set of guests and another set of conversations. EdTech Mondays Uganda is supported by the Mastercard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and the Innovation Village.